Why we provide different internet solutions for your different needs. SLT Fiber, 4G and ADSL. SLT Broadband, just the way you want it.
Tonight, dealing diplomacy. 5 memorandum of understanding signed between Sri Lanka and the Philippines during President Maithripala Sirisena's visit to the country. More investments expected. City of Dreams. First phase, which includes land reclamation of the Colombo International Financial City, has been completed.
Today, Port City is not a threat to anybody, but it is an opportunity for all.
Fiscal solutions. Finance Minister Mangala Samaraweera says that discussions held with the IMF Managing Director were productive. More support from the international body to the country expected. And the British fiasco. British Prime Minister Theresa May suffers the defeat of her political career as lawmakers reject her proposal to leave the EU. In a matter of hours, she might lose her premiership as the opposition's no-confidence motion to be debated tonight, Wednesday, the 16th of January 2019.
Smart Android තාක්ෂණයෙන් එන Singer Vista TV එකක් මිලදී ගන්න ඔබට හිත පිරෙන්න වාසි රැසක් ඕනෑම Singer ප්‍රදර්ශනාගාරයකින්.
From Ada Derana, this is Ada Derana First at 9 with Ndivari Amuwata and Mahesh Jani. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to First at 9 right here on Ada Derana 24. Good evening, Indivari.
Good evening, Mahesh. I think we have a lot of developments locally, especially with our finance minister in Washington, D.C. trying to move ahead with the IMF, the standby arrangement, and also the Port City reclamation progress has been made. But I think we have more interesting news to begin with.
Yes, it's going to be testing times for British Prime Minister Theresa May. It could be a break or make moment for her tonight. So we're going to start off with that story. Now, British politics, together with the life of Prime Minister Theresa May, was plunged into uncertainty yesterday after the Parliament voted overwhelmingly against the Premier's Brexit divorce deal. Now, members of the UK Parliament voted 432 to 202 against the deal reached between the British government and the EU, making it the largest parliamentary defeat for a sitting UK government in history.
Now, the opposition leader as well as the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, tabled a motion of no confidence on the government following the defeat. Despite Labour's bid to trigger a general election, one senior party figure has suggested it is unlikely to succeed, with Northern Ireland's DUP and Tory rebels saying they will back the Premier.
Now, the confidence vote is expected to be held at about 1900 GMT, and May has told parliamentarians that she will return to the Commons with an alternative plan next week, provided she survives the no-confidence motion.
British lawmakers defeated Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit divorce deal by a crushing margin yesterday after a debate of some 8 days over 54 hours, triggering political upheaval that could lead to a disorderly exit from the EU or even a reversal of the 2016 decision to leave. It was a widely expected result, and one of the reasons the British PM pushed back the vote was to buy more time. Maybe sensing the inevitability of things to come, Prime Minister Theresa May addressed Parliament in a last-ditch effort to melt the hearts of those lawmakers who opposed her Brexit deal to back her plan.
Parliament gave the people a choice. We set the clock ticking on our departure. The responsibility of each and every one of us at this moment is profound, for this is an historic decision that will set the future of our country for generations. A second referendum would lead instead to further division. The second possible outcome is that we leave on the 29th of March without a deal.
To the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. On a point of order. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. The House has spoken and the government will listen. But tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took in a referendum Parliament decided to hold. And people, particularly EU citizens who've made their home here, and UK citizens living in the EU, deserve clarity on these questions as soon as possible. I became Prime Minister immediately after that referendum. I believe it's my duty to deliver on their instruction, and I intend to do so.
The result of tonight's vote is the greatest defeat for a government since the 1920s in this House. This is a catastrophic defeat for this government. I have now tabled a motion of no confidence in this government. And I'm pleased that motion will be debated tomorrow, so this House can give its verdict on the sheer incompetence of this government and pass that motion of no confidence in the government.
Well, it is a given that when the equilibrium of global heavyweights are affected, on one way or the other, they send ripples across the globe, also affecting bystanders, or in other words, smaller nations as ours. We know that the United Kingdom will be massively affected by its latest political machinations, and it's worth the while to delve into what implications they carry for the rest of the globe. We spoke to a few experts to obtain their thoughts on the matter.
There is political and economic uncertainty in the United Kingdom. This result can have far-reaching, most probably negative consequences within the United Kingdom and beyond that. European Union was formed in order to overcome some of the difficulties created by the indigenous capitalism in these European countries. With the European countries adopting neoliberal model in the 80s of the last century, the situation became worse. True that big corporations earned money, they grew, their profits increased, but the majority of people did not receive these benefits. That is why the majority of the people in the United Kingdom decided in 2016 to leave the European Union, and they want the United Kingdom to look after its own business. But corporate sector in the United Kingdom and also in the European Union want the Union to be together. This situation can have negative impacts on the global economy and also in poor countries like ours.
The whole thing adds another layer of uncertainty to the global economy. Many companies will be affected in Asia. They might even review their investment strategies. There are experts who discuss that the void of this whole geopolitical tension between the trade wars between US and China, then the Brexit which happened right now, and then China will take a serious advantage of this situation. China would be able to, as predicted by the World Economic Forum, that by 2030 there will be two superpowers, not one. So I think they will slowly move into their position as one of the global powers in the next couple of years.
Well, we'd like to talk more on this topic, whether Britain's exit from the EU and its deal that is on the balance, and whether it will affect Sri Lanka or not, and the rest of the region. We'll come back after a short commercial break. Do stay with us here on First at 9. Well, as promised, we'd like to talk more on Brexit. Now, interesting comments have been circulating on social media. Theresa may exit the British government and her rule before even the Brexit deal works out. So with these comments, I think it's opportune time for us to discuss more on it. We've invited to our studios an analyst and expert in foreign policy and international relations, George Cook, who is the Deputy Director of the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome to First at 9.
Thank you.
Well, George, I think we've been talking at length about Brexit and its implications, but now with a no deal, with all these developments in the UK, at one time one of the most powerful empires in the world, and now in modern day politics, with all this chaos, what's it for Britain and the region?
So the Brexit vote that took place 2 years ago obviously rattled international relations discourse. We're looking at two key areas. One is sovereignty and the other is regionalism. Britain wanted to come out, or a majority that voted at that point wanted to come out of the European Union, citing a violation of sovereignty. But of course, in the process, they've ended up jeopardizing sovereignty within the United Kingdom, keeping the four parts together. This has become one of the biggest challenges. We saw that in the wake of the Brexit vote. We saw that upon Theresa May's being sworn in as Prime Minister. Although she did say Brexit is Brexit and they would go ahead with it, the very next day she flew to Scotland to reassure Nicola Sturgeon and the 62% of the people of Scotland who voted to remain, that whatever was done would be done in consultation with, in cooperation with the people of Scotland. Northern Ireland is another issue with regard to the border. So we're opening up old issues as well once again here. That's in terms of sovereignty. On the other hand, with regionalism, the European Union was held up as one of the foremost examples of regionalism in terms of integration, where the regions had come together over a long period of time since the end of the Second World War. But this has been rattled. This has been shaken to the very core. And the European Union obviously wants to progress further. This has become a stumbling block.
Now, if you take the incidents that took place yesterday, the drama that unfolded in the British Parliament, British Prime Minister came and put her Brexit plan to vote, lost with a massive majority towards the opposition, which means her own party members voted against her. What does this mean going forward in case she fails tonight? In case that the no confidence motion by the opposition, wins ground at the British Parliament, does this mean that the whole political system in the United Kingdom has gone back to square one and they have to restart the whole entire process? Or what will happen?
They're actually facing a rather huge dilemma at this point, simply because in case she does lose, which is said to be unlikely for various reasons, but of course you never know. This is numbers and it's numbers game. In case she does lose at this point, they have a 2-week period in which to decide on whether they can form a government or not, and thereafter it's going in for a general election. And as she has been saying, as she said just a few minutes ago in the House as well, it's a very, very difficult time, and what she feels is going for an election would divide the country even more rather than uniting the country at this particular point. So she is not exactly in favor of going for a general election, nor is she in favor of a second referendum.
Yeah, but the issue here has been what the Prime Minister proposes, what she says we should not be doing, is the exact thing that her party members are going against with, and the accusation that they continuously keep making towards her is that she is not listening to their proposals and they are not getting the best solution to Britain from this particular deal. So how can she change her entire tune?
This is where Jeremy Corbyn has called her government a zombie government at this point, with the way it's going forward. 2 years of negotiations. What has been done within the country in building consensus amongst policymakers, amongst politicians, within the Parliament, within the House of Commons? How much cross-party talks have taken place? These are the massive problems that she's facing today. And it is today when they turn around and say, you have not consulted us, you have not spoken to us. Her own backbenchers are having problems with that. And that's why you saw 118 of her own backbenchers voting down the draft withdrawal plan yesterday.
Right, I think with Brexit and with the tight deadline, at the end of March for Brexit, I'd also like to ask you what you think would be implications on the region, and also specifically on smaller nations as Sri Lanka. And I'd like you to comment a little on Sri Lanka's balance of powers with China and India, because we've been talking about the Port City project, the reclamation work being complete. That's up next, but let's comment on that too.
So initially talking about what impact this would have on the region, the European Union is very concerned. We've seen their concern throughout. They did not want Britain to vote the way it did in 2016, but it happened. There were several attempts that were made. So many governments called for Britain to remain. Of course, from the day Britain joined, 2 years later, in 1970s, we saw Britain trying to leave. So this is not something new. And of course, David Cameron promised the referendum. He had to go ahead with it. And the rest is democracy. This is part of how democracy plays out and what we saw happening. But of course, the other countries, now this is having an impact on other countries simply because there are other parties, minority parties, maybe parties not in government in other European countries, which are also now questioning. If Britain can leave, and if Britain is asking for a better deal, why can't we ask for a better deal? And that's where you're going to see it. We're not going to see a situation in which Britain is going to get the best of the deal. Simply because if Britain gets it today, the other countries will want it tomorrow and thereafter. Now, at that point, you don't have a European Union as everyone starts to leave. And this is where we are going to see them wanting to ensure that the situation is tided over. Only yesterday, the German Vice Chancellor attempted to say there are options, we have to look at other alternatives. Other leaders are talking about other alternatives as well, which is no Brexit. And that's what they're trying to call for. A second referendum is something they would welcome. They're even willing to keep Britain in, despite the fact that all these years have gone by and we've wasted time, more or less, in the EU plan.
Now, talking so very quickly about the China-India matter that we were talking about, we'll have to go into the next story. What do you think is it for Sri Lanka with the power balance and the regional superpowers, at Sri Lanka?
This is where Sri Lanka as a small country is not in a position to take sides. Sri Lanka needs all countries out there, irrespective of the country, irrespective of the region. We have consistently talked about the fact that Sri Lanka is a friend to all and enemy to none. This is where at all times we've got to realize that there are certain power plays within the region, outside the region. We've got to make the most out of it for Sri Lanka. This is where there has to be a pro-Sri Lanka stance adopted at all times, irrespective of the situation, irrespective of the country. We will be mindful of the interests of the country. Whether it's a loan that is taken, whether it is a grant that is received, whether it is a negotiation, it has to be utilized to the best opportunity in favor of the country.
So very quickly, George, you touched on the no Brexit. Which means if there could be a second referendum, and this is where most of the parties within the parliament is pushing for. Is that democracy?
That's a very good question. And this is where you begin to question, going back to 2016, where many people who voted came out the next morning and said, we didn't expect the Prime Minister to resign. And you'd think you made your vote, you voted, you made a concerted decision. You did not vote in a very haphazard manner. Now, was enough campaigning done to explain the repercussions of going out or staying in? Now, or was it merely party politics? Was it merely trading accusations? What was going on at the time in the campaign? How much did the British people understand? How many of them went out in their numbers and voted?
Right, I think, George, that's all the time we have. But thank you very much for your time here in our studios, and I'm glad you shared your expertise with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, as I did mention to you yesterday, that the land reclamation process of the port city, the country's first modern planned city, has achieved completion. The reclamation process was the first phase, and it was funded by China with an investment of $1.4 billion.
The reclaimed land is now ready for ground improvement, land formation and layout of infrastructure facilities. The second phase kicked off today with an official ceremony under the patronage of Minister of Megapolis and Western Development, Patali Champika Ranawaka, as well as Chinese Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Cheng Shiyong.
The Colombo Port City is the largest single foreign direct investment project in Sri Lanka with an investment of $15 billion. The joint project between Sri Lanka and China Harbour Engineering Company will see one of the most principal destinations under China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative being established. It will be developed as a residential, retail and business destination. The development will comprise of 5 different precincts, including the Financial District, Central Park Living, Island Living, the Marina and the International Island. Once completed, the city will have 269 hectares of reclaimed land, with 116 hectares being handed over to the China Communications Construction Company, the parent company of China Harbour Engineering Company. The Sri Lankan government will own the remaining land, out of which 62 hectares will be used to set up the financial city and 91 hectares to be used as public spaces. The construction of the Colombo port city commenced under the patronage of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa and Chinese President Xi Jinping on the 16th of September back in 2014. Despite hitting a few speed bumps along the way, the project is now given the all-clear. The port city saw its first phase land reclamation process being completed today. The $1.4 billion first phase took almost 4.5 years, and the new land is now ready for ground improvement, land formation and layout of infrastructure facilities. In the meantime, the second phase of the project got underway today.
Port City is a technological marvel and without doubt one of the most spectacular development projects this country will ever see. The question that would come to anybody's mind is, what benefit is there for Sri Lanka? I can only give you a message of hope. We are positioning our country for a quantum leap where opportunity is concerned not just for now but for generations to come. A recent international article which was published in the World Economic Forum website estimated that the broad market for smart city products and services will be worth of 2.57 trillion by 2025. Port City is going to be a smart city and it will be taking share of that market. We not only solve the inherent problems of the project but introduce additional value to it, such as seamless connectivity to the Port City by introducing new road and tunnel connecting Port City direct to the Marine Drive, Kolpiti and right railway system to run through the Port City connecting direct to the central business district of Colombo. Today, Port City is not a threat to anybody, but it is an opportunity for all.
More than 4,000 jobs has been provided to local people, benefiting thousands of Sri Lankan families. At the same time, the fishermen livelihood improvement program implemented by the project company has benefited tens of thousands of fishermen. No matter how the international situation changes, China always facilitates great importance to Sri Lanka relations.
So, what's next in this project? The next step of this project is establishing infrastructure facilities including electricity, water distribution, road development, and all of these facilities will be distributed through an underground tunnel. People can travel through this tunnel by vehicles. Sri Lanka's largest development project will see its completion in its entirety in another 25 years. Before that, however, we will be able to witness the completion of its main element, the financial hub, by 2025.
In other stories we have for you tonight, President Maithripala Sirisena is currently in the Philippines, and the visiting head of state kicked off his 4-day state visit today, meeting with his counterpart Rodrigo Duterte.
Well, with the commencement of bilateral talks between the two leaders, 5 memoranda of understanding was signed between Sri Lanka and the Philippines.
President Maithripala Sirisena commenced a 4-day state visit to the Philippines today, marking the first invitation extended to a Sri Lankan head of state to undertake an official visit to their country during the period of 58 years of diplomatic relations between Sri Lanka and the Philippines. The president arrived at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila, where he was warmly received by a special delegation, including the Trade and Investment Minister of Philippines yesterday. A special ceremony was organized at the Malacanang Palace, where the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte welcomed President Maithripala Sirisena.
You are the very first Sri Lankan president serving as head of state and government to visit the Philippines. We face common challenges and we are united by our desire to provide greater peace, progress, and prosperity for our people. We both recognize that the proliferation of illegal drugs is a threat to our nation and peoples. We acknowledge that poverty reduction and long-term sustainable development are cornerstones of our efforts to improve the lives of our people.
Following the meeting, 5 MOUs were signed between the two countries related to economics, tourism, education, as well as bilateral relations.
Now, the topic of the new constitution keeps popping up almost every day in political circles, to the point there seems no getting away from it. This was very much the case with the leader of the opposition today, as members of the media requested him to express his stance on the proposed document. His stance was very clear, saying that since the government doesn't have a majority in parliament, they do not have the mandate to bring proposals for a new constitution.
Leader of the opposition, Mahinda Rajapaksa, arrived at the Isipatanarame temple in Polonnaruwa today to call on its chief incumbent, Udagama Sri Dhammananda Thera. This is an amendment which attempts to divide the country. Some say it's an amendment, some say it's a draft, while some others say it's none of these. They presented 3 or 4 reports written by someone to the parliament, and that's the beginning of their plan. That's what they say. The issue can be seen when you go through that. This parliament doesn't have the right to introduce it. They don't have the majority to pass it anyway.
Well, business news is on the other side of this break. Stay with First at 9.
Welcome back. The political deadlock, which lasted 51 days, had profound effect on the monetary fund of the country. 3 rating agencies downgraded Sri Lanka, including Modi's, during that period. But whether it was deserved or not is an entirely different and debatable issue.
Now, on the 21st of November, the International Monetary Fund moved to suspend discussions on the next tranche of the $1.5 billion loan. Now, Sri Lanka have received over $1 billion so far, and the government was expecting a 6th tranche of around $250 million, with the expectations that the total loan installments would be completed during the middle part of this year.
Now, with the aim of getting things back on track and moving forward, Minister of Finance and Mass Media Mangala Samaravira called on the Managing Director and Chairperson of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, in Washington, D.C. yesterday. After the meeting, the minister took to Twitter and said that the discussions were productive and Sri Lanka will remain committed to progressive economic reforms.
Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, and Non-Cabinet Minister of Economic Reforms and Public Distribution, Dr. Harshadi Silva, together with Minister of Finance Mangala Samaravira, held talks with a delegation of the IMF led by its chief, Christine Lagarde. She was accompanied by Deputy Managing Director of the body, Mitsuhiro Furusawa, and Director of the Asia and Pacific Department at the IMF, Chang Yong-ri. The meeting was conducted to signal the government's intention to continue with the IMF reform program, and a key objective is to negotiate the trajectory of continued fiscal consolidation while accommodating policies to support growth and strengthen the social safety net. Taking to Twitter after the meeting, Minister Mangala Samaravira stated that the discussions held with the IMF Managing Director were productive and Sri Lanka will remain committed to progressive economic reforms. He further stated that a team from the IMF will visit Sri Lanka next month to resume discussions. Following the meeting, Lagarde commented, saying, quote, "We discussed the challenging economic environment and the policy priorities for the country. The authorities stressed Sri Lanka's continued commitment to their economic reform agenda under the IMF-supported program," unquote. She further noted, quote, "We agreed that a strong policy mix, effective implementation of that agenda is key to strengthening confidence while putting Sri Lanka on a sustainable, high-quality growth path that would benefit its people, and the IMF remains ready to support the Sri Lankan authorities in these endeavours," unquote.
The objective of the meeting obviously was to work with IMF and other agencies in order to rebuild the trust and confidence that we lost during the 51-day coup. As everyone knows, it has had a huge negative impact on our ability to engage the international financial market. We have shown the world that we are a responsible country and promptly paid $1,000 million that came due on Monday. We act with responsibility. The discussions were successful. We looked at a couple of options how to go forward because it was on the 26th of October the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank had reach what's called a staff level agreement with IMF, and they were to announce it on that following Monday, which obviously happened, and all IMF support was suspended.
The Bank of China has agreed to offer a loan of $300 million to Sri Lanka, with provisions included to raise the sum to $1 billion. International media reports that the Sri Lankan government is considering the offer because of difficulty in borrowing money after recent rating downgrades. State Minister of Finance Derana to confirm the reports and said Sri Lanka is considering the loan to help meet repayments in coming months. He further confirmed to international media that Sri Lanka had started negotiations to increase the amount of a swap deal with India's central bank to $1 billion, up from a previously negotiated $400 million. The government also utilized $1 billion from its reserves for external debt servicing, and the Minister of Finance confirmed the move on Monday.
Well, that's all from First at 9 for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. If you did miss any of our stories tonight, do log on to www.otherderana.lk. I'm Derana.
And I'm Mahesh Johnny. Have a good night.